Yay or nay, the Boston Bruins have a playoff caliber team.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Tuesday, December 3rd, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And before we get started debating whether or not the Bruins are a playoff team, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes, at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. I've been covering this team for various outlets for 19 years, ever since the Joe Thornton trade, actually. I was a full-time hockey news editor at The Score. Been hosting this podcast daily since 2019, and a quick reminder also to please hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube if you have not already. So, if you look at the NHL standings here on Tuesday, December 3rd, you'll see the Boston Bruins in third place in the Atlantic Division, 27 points, 4 behind the Florida Panthers, and 5 behind the Toronto Maple Leafs, 1 up on the Tampa Bay Lightning. So, in that sense, yes, this is a playoff team. If the playoffs started right now, the Bruins would be in. And there's every reason to believe they should be a playoff team. Let's start with the yay side here. The Boston Bruins finished second in the Atlantic last season. They beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in the first round of the playoffs and very nearly pushed the Florida Panthers to Game 7 in the second round, losing in Game 6 after having to play without Brad Marchand for a couple games because of that injury that he suffered as a result of that Sam Bennett sucker punch to the face. They went out this offseason and added Elias Lindholm. They added Nikita Zadorov. They stabilized the goaltending position by locking up Jeremy Swayman, one of the game's best young goalies, to a contract extension, paying him very well over the next little while. And then, of course, you have Charlie McAvoy, one of the game's best young, well, he's not really that young anymore, but one of the game's best defensemen. You have David Pastrnak, who is one of the game's best forwards. So right there, you have the core of a playoff team. Between Swayman, between McAvoy, and Pastrnak, you have 3 guys that would be the envy of many other clubs around the NHL for building blocks around which to form a contending squad. Then you add in the fact that Charlie Coyle, Pavel Zacha coming off career seasons. You add Lindholm down the middle to help with center depth. You have some young guys making a leap in Mason Lohrei, Johnny Beecher taking the next step. And you would think that you have the makings of a playoff team. And as we saw yesterday, if you look at this team under Joe Sacco, they have been pretty good. Yes, it's only a 6-game sample size, but they're very much improved defensively. The scoring has been a bit feast or famine, but they have improved in that area. The penalty kill under Joe Sacco is second in the NHL. The power play's improved a bit. They're allowing only 24 shots per game, which is second fewest in the NHL. And they are taking 29.2 shots per game, which is 13th in the NHL. We've regularly seen them outshot at times this season. We've seen them prioritize shot quality over shot quantity under former head coach Jim Montgomery. So if you look at the Bruins under Joe Sacco, yeah, they're pretty good. Right now, they rank 10th in the NHL with a 667 point percentage. Again, 1.83 goals allowed per game, which is the fewest in the NHL since Sacco took over. The scoring still only 19th, but they have shown flashes of breaking through with a pair of 6-goal games, one against Montreal and one against the Islanders. So hopefully that trend can continue. So on paper, and if you look at the past 6 games or so, you think, yeah, the Bruins, this team is pretty good, and they definitely should be a Stanley Cup playoff team. You have, again, Swayman rounding into form and becoming more of the elite level goalie that we know that he can be. You have Joonas Korpisalo coming in and outplaying Swayman so far, as he has Linus Ullmark in Ottawa. He's been the best of those 3 goalies, which nobody could have predicted at this point. You have Hampus Lindholm injured, so when you get him back, that will only help with the defensive structure of this team. He was arguably Boston's best player before getting injured. So add it all up, and you do indeed have the makings of a playoff team. Improved penalty kill, a positive shot differential each and every night, improved overall team defense, improved goaltending, and Joe Sacco has really helped turn things around a little bit here. But is it enough? And are the Bruins in too deep of a hole to get out of and become a playoff team? Are there too many barriers for them to really rise in the Eastern Conference and become a wildcard team, perhaps? Maybe even get into the top 3 in the Atlantic? We'll discuss the nay here as the podcast continues. You can run your game all season long with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action daily. And with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. They offer weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday. Today is Tuesday, and every week Prize Picks discount select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app, use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Thanks so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today we're debating whether or not the Bruins are a playoff team. Earlier in the podcast, I mentioned the core 3 players that they have that any team would love to build around: Jeremy Swayman, Charlie McAvoy, and David Pastrnak. You also have a captain in Brad Marchand who just embodies the black and gold and who has really come into his own as the captain of this team. Not to mention some key free agent additions in Elias Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov, who after, a bumpy start, maybe are rounding into form here and learning what it means to be a Boston Bruin. Having said all that, there are some huge stumbling blocks for this team in reality. While the Bruins are 3rd in the Atlantic when it comes to total points earned so far this season, they're actually fourth in point percentage. They're behind Toronto, who's at 667, the Panthers at 620, and the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are below the Bruins in the standings, but they have 3 games in hand and are only 1 point back. So you can see how there's a pathway there for Tampa to overtake the Bruins. Not only that, but Boston's goal differential is atrocious. They're at minus 16, which is 7th in the Atlantic. Worse than Buffalo, worse than Detroit, their opponent tonight, and worse than Ottawa. In fact, in the Eastern Conference as a whole, only Montreal and Pittsburgh have worse goal differentials, and the Bruins were only able to score 1 goal against Pittsburgh on Friday night, which was a very big wasted opportunity. Not only that, but when you look at point percentages in the Eastern Conference, the Bruins come in at 10th, and they're behind a couple of metropolitan teams. Don't forget, you have 3 teams from each division who qualify for the playoffs, and then you have the 2 wildcard spots, not necessarily reserved for one from each division. You could have 2 metropolitan teams in the wild cards. You could have 2 Atlantic teams or one of each. Right now, when you look at the wild card situation, you have the Rangers and the Flyers in those wild card spots, and the Lightning outside the playoff picture. But again, it's easy to see Tampa overtaking Boston because they have those 3 games in hand, leaving Boston technically behind 3 Metropolitan Division teams in the race for the final wildcard spot. They're behind the Rangers, they're behind the Blue Jackets, they're behind the Flyers. And you also have Buffalo creeping up behind as well. Only 3 points back of the Bruins with 2 games in hand. All these teams have better goal differentials than the Bruins. Only one, the Philadelphia Flyers, have a negative goal differential. It's very, very difficult to qualify for the playoffs with negative goal differential. It just doesn't happen. That's the whole point of hockey, is that you score more goals than the opposition. If you're giving up more goals more regularly than the opposition, chances are you're not going to be good enough to qualify for the playoffs. Now, if you look out west, there's only 6 teams with positive goal differentials, so perhaps that trend will be bucked. But in the East, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams with positive goal differentials, and the Bruins well down in 14th. This team just is not deep enough offensively. That is the main problem for this team. You can look at the goaltending, which has been okay, and it's getting better under Joe Sacco and improving because of Jeremy Swayman finding his game. Korpisalo has been very, very good in that backup spot. You have a defense that's pretty strong, especially when Hampus Lindholm is in the mix. But Zadorov has been kind of a miss as a free agent, regularly taking penalties, not really contributing much offensively, although he did get his first goal the other night on an empty net. But that's been kind of a bad investment so far, as has Lindholm, to be honest. He's not really blowing things away here offensively for the Boston Bruins. And the big problem with this team right now is offensive depth. You don't have anybody averaging even a point per game. David Pastrnak well off his regular production. So not only are you struggling depth-wise, but your best player has been still your best player, but far below what you would expect production-wise from Pastrnak. We would expect at least 40 points at this point. He's only on pace for 73 points, 28 goals, 44 assists. Last season, he had 47 goals and 63 assists. The year before that, he had 61 goals and 52 assists. So you would think he could have at least 15 goals by now. He's on pace for half of what he had 2 seasons ago in terms of goals. And his playmaking has fallen off as well. And it's not because he isn't shooting as much. He does have, he's on pace for 330 shots on goal, but his shooting percentage is well below where we would expect it to be. He's at 8.6. His career average is 13.7. So unless he finds his game, the Bruins are in trouble. And they also don't really have the offensive depth going for them right now. Lindholm with only 3 goals, 13 points. Pavel Zacha with 5 goals, 6 assists. Justin Brazeau is 5th on this team in scoring with 5 goals, 5 assists, tied with Cole Koepke. Charlie McAvoy, only 10 points despite the offensive outburst the other day against Montreal. Charlie Coyle, 7 goals, 1 assist. Trent Frederick, only 8 points. And on it goes. Morgan Geekie, only 6 points. Matt Poitras, sent down to the AHL. Tyler Johnson, only 2 assists so far for the Bruins, who has yet to find the back of the net. Max Jones, Riley Tufte, who were signed on July 1st, 0 points. So you have a situation where you let Jake DeBrusk walk in free agency. He was not replaced. He's been excellent lately for the Vancouver Canucks. Even Danton Heinen wasn't replaced, and they invested center in net with Swayman's extension. On defense with Zadorov, and you're not getting the returns so far on those key acquisitions. So when you're looking at the playoff picture and you look at how strong the Metropolitan Division is with, let's say, at least 6 teams who are in playoff contention, 6 teams well above 500 right now. Only the Islanders and Penguins are below 500. And then you look at the Atlantic. The Bruins are at above 500, but the Sabres are right behind them. And tonight's opponent, Detroit, they're 1 point. If they win tonight, they're back at 500 as well. So it's a key game for the Boston Bruins tonight, and they cannot afford to drop points against teams below them in the standings as they did the other night against Pittsburgh. If they had beaten Pittsburgh, I'd be a bit more optimistic. Those of you who listen regularly know that I'm a glass half full kind of guy for the most part. But that game really, really disappointed me and showed that the Bruins have more of an uphill battle than we anticipated here when it comes to being a playoff team. They can pick up a big 2 points tonight against the Detroit Red Wings, and it's a game we'll preview here as the podcast continues. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and you can get in on the NFL action every weekend by signing up today. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. So if you go to FanDuel, for example, and look at the over-under for tonight's Bruins-Red Wings game, that is set at 5.5, so put $5 down. If you hit that, you get $150 in bonus bets. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment warm with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let us preview tonight's game between the Boston Bruins and the Detroit Red Wings. It's the first of a back-to-back for the Bruins. They'll be in Chicago tomorrow night to take on a Blackhawks team that lost last night to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And they'll have the advantage of getting the extra night rest, whereas the Bruins will have to travel from Boston to Chicago after this one to prepare for tomorrow night's game. Now, the Red Wings are 4-4-2 over their past 10 games. They are coming off losses to the Devils and an overtime loss to Vancouver, where the aforementioned Jake DeBrusk had 4 points in that one, I believe, a hat trick and an assist. The Bruins are 5-4-1 over their past 10. So that's 11 points in 10 games, slightly better than 500. And they've been kind of up and down. They did win 2 games against Utah and Detroit in the first couple games under Joe Sacco, then lost to Vancouver, beat the Islanders, lost to Pittsburgh, and beat Montreal. The Bruins outplayed Vancouver. They could really be 6-0 here under Joe Sacco, but here we are, 4-2, facing a Red Wings team that they just beat 2-1 just on November 23rd. Now, when it comes to special teams, Detroit's power play is quite proficient. They will be without Patrick Kane, who's injured at the moment, but they still have a lot of talent on the power play unit, and they rank 4th with a 27.8% success rate. The Bruins have improved a bit on the power play lately, but they're still dead last at 11.7%. On the other end, Detroit's penalty kill is dead last at 65.2%, so perhaps this is an opportunity for the Bruins to break through even further on the power play. Boston's penalty kill ranks 20th, 78.5%. The Bruins offense still pretty poor. They rank 30th at 2.46, and that's after the boost from the 6 goals against Montreal and 6 against the Islanders last week. Red Wings not much better, 2.63 goals per game. They rank 25th. Boston's team defense, they rank 17th, 3.08 goals allowed per game, whereas the Red Wings are 23rd. They rank 3.17 allowed goals per game. Their goaltending is pretty strong, though. Cam Talbot, 915 save percentage. Alex Lyon, a 911 save percentage, although I believe Talbot is injured, so we can expect Lyon in net. The Bruins will likely split Korpisalo and Swayman. Swayman has started the last couple games, so perhaps it'll be Korpisalo. He's got a 907 save percentage. Swayman's rising to 892, but still some work to do to get over that 900 hump. Lucas Raymond has 7 points over the past 5 games, including 4 goals. David Pastrnak with 4 points, but only 1 goal in his last 5 games, 1 goal in 8 games, I believe. The Red Wings are led in scoring by Raymond. He's got 7 goals, 18 assists for 25 points. Alex DeBrincat, 21 points. Dylan Larkin at 20 points. The Bruins have only 1 player over the 20-point mark. That's Pastrnak, 9 goals, 14 assists. And then you have Brad Marchand at 17 points. I had said on social media earlier before the season that I predicted Jake DeBrusk would finish second in scoring only to David Pastrnak this season, and that's kind of coming true. So that's the situation here heading into tonight's game. The Bruins, you could very much argue, are not a playoff team and have a lot of work to do. Well, yeah, if you look at the Eastern Conference rankings, they're 10th in point percentage, have a lot of work to do here to solidify themselves as a playoff team. And that has to begin tonight against Detroit. Keep going tomorrow against Chicago. You simply can't lose to teams below you in the standings. Excuse me. All right, that is it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, my friends. Please do take some time to check out Locked On Fantasy next. All the latest tips from Steal and Flip to help you get the edge over the competition this week. Please do subscribe to Locked On Bruins if you haven't already. It's a bit of a quick and dirty episode here, but life happens. We got to press on, and thank you all for the support lately as, things just keep trucking along. Please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you again here tomorrow on a fresh episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day.